In the heart of the desert, nestled among the quiet plains, a lone ranch sits untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But when a gang of ruthless outlaws targets this peaceful haven, they make a grave mistake. The rancher's wife, an unassuming woman with a calm demeanor, isn't just another cowboy's spouse. She's a living legend. Years ago, she was a top Marine sniper, a sharpshooter whose skills were feared in battle. When these men cross her path, they have no idea who they're dealing with. As tension builds and the outlaws close in, the quiet rancher's wife takes aim. But just as the first shot rings out, an unexpected twist changes everything. Will the outlaws learn to fear the woman they underestimated, or will they walk away with more than they bargained for? Stay tuned. This story is just getting started. The sun was setting when the outlaws first rode into town, their horses kicking up dust as they approached the ranch. It was a typical quiet evening, with the rancher, John, tending to his cattle while his wife, Claire, prepared dinner inside. From the outside, nothing seemed out of place, just another couple living their simple life. But what the bandits didn't know was that Claire hadn't always been a rancher's wife. She had served 3 tours in the deadliest corners of the world, her eyes always on the target, her finger steady on the trigger. After the war, she swore off violence, trying to leave behind the ghosts of her past. But when danger comes knocking at her door, the old instincts kick in. As the outlaws began their intimidation, Claire stood frozen for a moment, her mind flashing back to missions long gone. What happens next could change everything. The leader of the outlaws, a man named Cole, dismounted with a swagger, his eyes scanning the ranch with a cold, calculating look. His gang of 5 followed, each one armed and clearly eager for trouble. Joan greeted them with the same calm he showed all visitors, but Claire could see the tension in his shoulders. They'd been expecting nothing more than another quiet evening. But now their home had become the target of men who didn't care for boundaries or peace. "Where's the cash, old man?" Cole's voice was sharp, a cruel edge to his words. John hesitated, his eyes darting toward Claire. She knew they didn't have money to give, not in the way these men wanted. John had sold the last of their livestock months ago to pay for repairs to the barn. But Cole didn't care about the details. His hand hovered near the revolver at his hip, a warning Claire couldn't ignore. In the shadows, Claire's fingers tightened around the old rifle hidden behind the door. She hadn't used it in years, but the weight felt familiar, like slipping into a well-worn jacket. Her heart raced, but her mind remained focused. She remembered the calm in the chaos, the way a sniper could make a difference with just one clean shot. Meanwhile, the other members of Cole's gang fanned out, looking for any signs of resistance. One man, eager to prove his worth, strutted toward the house, only to freeze when Claire stepped into view. Her face was neutral, but her stance spoke volumes. The outlaw sneered, thinking her nothing more than a farm woman, but the tension in the air thickened. Claire's eyes narrowed as she sized him up, calculating the distance, the wind, and every possible angle. Back inside, Joe tried to keep his composure, but fear was beginning to seep. "Shut up," Cole snapped, cutting him off. His face twisted with frustration, and Claire could see the madness behind his eyes. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Every muscle in Claire's body was screaming at her to act, but she stayed still, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. The man near the barn reached the door, peering into the shadows. Claire's mind flashed to the countless hours she had spent training, the long nights on the range, the careful adjustments to wind and light. She could feel the weight of the rifle against her shoulder, the barrel perfectly aligned with the target's chest. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. Suddenly, a shout broke the silence. The outlaw in the barn turned and sprinted back toward the others, panic in his eyes. "It's empty," he yelled, his voice shaky. That was all it took. Cole turned back to Claire, fury flashing in his gaze. "You think you can hide behind your house, behind your little husband? We've got what we need right here." He took a step forward, his hand inches from the revolver at his side. The other outlaws moved in closer, surrounding them like wolves closing in on prey. Claire could feel the cold steel of the rifle in her hands, her heart pounding in her chest. And then, from behind them, came the sound of hooves, the unmistakable clip-clop of more horses. The tension in the air escalated as all eyes turned, but the new sound was unexpected, too calm, too measured. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Had they been followed, or was it something else? The outlaws froze, unsure, scanning the horizon. Cole's hand twitched toward his gun, but something was off. The horses had stopped a little too far out, just beyond the edge of their vision. "Who's there?" Cole shouted, his voice low but filled with suspicion. For a moment, everything stood still. Claire's heart drummed in her ears. The moment she had feared had arrived. Something was about to break, and she had no idea which way the pieces would fall. The rifle felt heavier in her hands, the weight of decisions she didn't want to make pressing down on her. Then, without warning, the sound of a distant shot rang out. The first one echoed in the air, followed by a second, and a third. And in that instant, Claire realized someone else was out there, and they weren't here to negotiate. The outlaws spun, their attention divided, their nerves fraying. Claire's mind raced. Was it a friend, a foe, or was it the unexpected ghost of her past, hunting her down again? Whatever it was, it had just changed everything. The echo of the gunshots still hung in the air when the gang spun around, their hands reaching for their weapons, eyes scanning the horizon. Claire could see the fear creeping into Cole's eyes. The shots had come from the east, from the direction of the old canyon road, and the sound had set the outlaws on edge. They didn't know who or what had made the shots, but they knew one thing for sure: they weren't alone. John stepped forward, his voice shaky. Her mind raced. What was Mason doing here? Had he come to help? Or had he come for something else entirely? The last time she saw him, things had gone sour in ways she couldn't even put into words. Mason had always been ruthless, willing to bend the rules for the mission, no matter the cost. Was he here to settle an old score? Before she could process any more, the outlaws had noticed them too. Cole gritted his teeth, his hand twitching toward his revolver. "Stay put," he growled at his gang. "Let's see what these newcomers want." The riders drew closer, and Claire's eyes locked on Mason's. There was no smile, no wave of recognition, just cold, calculating eyes, as if he was ready for anything. The tension in the air thickened to an unbearable level. Claire's heart raced, but she knew one thing for sure. The situation had just escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. Now she had to decide. Would she stand with her old comrades, or would she face the gang and take them down on her own? Either way, something was about to break wide open, and there was no turning back. Mason's men circled the property, their eyes scanning the outlaws with a cold precision that made the gang nervous. Cole's hand hovered near his revolver, but it was clear he wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Claire stood frozen, the rifle still pressed to her shoulder, watching the tense standoff unfold. She had thought she could control the situation, but now everything was spinning out of her hands. Mason rode up slowly, his gaze never leaving the outlaws. He didn't acknowledge Claire, his face as hard as stone. "I suggest you leave," he said to Cole, his voice low and calm, but there was an edge to it that made Cole hesitate. "You don't want trouble," Cole shot back, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "This doesn't concern you, Mason." Mason didn't flinch. "It does now." He nodded to his men, who dismounted with practiced ease, weapons ready. The standoff was drawn out, each second stretching longer than the last. Claire's mind was racing. She knew Mason, knew how dangerous he could be. Was he here to help, or was this just another mission gone wrong? Her fingers tightened on the rifle, but she didn't take the shot. Something didn't feel right. Suddenly, without warning, one of Mason's men fired a shot into the air. The outlaws flinched, startled by the sudden violence. The momentary distraction was all it took. In an instant, Claire dropped to a knee, her eyes narrowing, and she fired. The shot rang out, precise and deadly. One of the outlaws crumpled to the ground, the others scattering in panic. Chaos erupted in the blink of an eye. Mason's men moved swiftly, taking control of the situation, their military